So to start off, I'm going to talk about the nature of internet browsers and also email platforms. So internet browsers are essentially, like your Safaris, your Google Chromes, your Firefoxes, et cetera, et cetera. Whether you're on a Mac, whether you're on a Windows computer or PC, or even whatever laptop you're on, your computer can host a variety of browsers. Usually for Apple computers, they automatically use Safari right out the gate, but you're welcome to download a variety of other options as well. So for instance, on my laptop, I have Google Chrome, Safari, and Firefox just for whatever I need to work on, or if I need to access different things. When you're, choosing a browser or even selecting like your primary browser, uh, obviously there are a lot of things to consider. Certainly the interface may look different. So with Google Chrome, your search engine is automatically Google, whereas on Safari, Apple has their own sort of search function where you may have to go into Safari, type in Google, and then you get Google, versus on Google Chrome, you automatically open it. It's automatically Google. There are other, platforms. Obviously, Edge is Microsoft's newest one, and then other groups as well. Um, with regards to navigation and things like that, obviously, things like bookmarks, being able to bookmark could be considered as important, and being able to open up various tabs as well. Finally, regarding speed, Google Chrome has been known to be one of the faster internet browsers, Internet Explorer more on the slower end. However, there's sort of trade-offs, as always, with each of these platforms. So regarding security, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but Google Chrome sort of has this function where you're automatically signed in to all of your Google accounts. So that's your YouTube, your Google Drives, whatever other accounts, even if you're not necessarily aware that you had signed in. So a lot of people are a bit wary about that, where Google automatically signs you into all of these places. Whereas for like a Safari or a Firefox, that's not necessarily the case. Regarding emails, so obviously emails are the way that you communicate. It's how Bob and I communicate about these things. It's how you guys know about a lot of our newsletters and a lot about our events. But there are a variety of different kinds of emails, surprisingly. I'd imagine that most people on here would probably have Gmail for the most part, given that the university does push out a very high Google related sort of outlook where they give everybody Gmail accounts with usc.edu. So that's an example of a Gmail. However, there are other ones like Outlook, which is Microsoft's, Yahoo Mail, which is Yahoo's, Zoohoo, and then Proton Mail, which are both independent servers. Granted, some of these other servers may charge fees for having certain custom domains. So for instance, like the usc.edu at the end of your email is considered a specific domain. For some of these emails, you could sort of create your own. For Yahoo, it may be at yahoo.com. For Gmail, maybe at gmail.com. Outlook at outlook.com. But for Proton and Zoohoo, you could sort of customize that on your own at a price. So it's, again, sort of the trade-off of whether you want to pay for those kinds of things or if you're satisfied with how the interface looks as is. Most of them are pretty straightforward regarding like sending out emails. So if you have Gmail, you just click to create a new email and then you send it out. That format is usually consistent across all groups, just for ease of access, and because why make it a hard time to send out an email. Again, differences across these may be price, the ability for storage, so the amount of emails that you could have within your inbox, the interface, so how it looks visually, and then whether it's connected to other appliances. So for your Google email, that could be connected to Google Drive and Yahoo, or not Yahoo, and YouTube, whereas something like Yahoo Mail, it may be connected to like a Yahoo Sports account or like a Yahoo like general searching browser account. And then I think like Proton or Zoohoo, I mean, they wouldn't really be connected to anything given that they're both independent by nature. So now I'll quickly move over to social media platforms. I'm going to talk about some of the more, or at least the ones that we've talked about in the past. So Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, And I believe there's one more that I'll be talking about. So I'll start with Facebook, traditional one. A lot of people use Facebook, obviously, to catch up with friends and to see updates on news. And that's pretty much consistent across all social media platforms. I'll talk about the differences a little bit later between each. But essentially, at bare bones, the nature of social media is whether the person that you want to connect to is already on that platform, is what dictates a lot of whether people use that platform in the first place or not. For instance, like the difference between Twitter and Facebook is that Twitter may be more news heavy, whereas Facebook may be more like picture friendly or more based on like creating groups or hosting events. For certain browsers, relating to graphics, not necessarily. I would say visually they would look different, but what makes one browser better than the other may be speed or privacy, and those are both pretty subjective. So Google Chrome is pretty fast, but you lose a lot of security. Internet Explorer may be pretty slow, but it's pretty secure. So you sort of have to play around in terms of which one satisfies both of those things the best. Again, with Facebook, there are different things that you could do with Facebook. So obviously the instant messaging function on Facebook is what really brought it, to the forefront in terms of the social media race, where you could find friends and message them and create group conversations with them. And then you could organize groups for different events. So we've organized potlucks using Facebook. We've organized banquets using Facebook, where those sort of notifications pop up in your email. If you're connecting your Facebook account to your email, you could see it via your email. And so, things like that. Instagram, again, is more picture heavy. So again, same by nature, you can also follow friends, organizations, and other celebrities. But the nature of posting things is heavily reliant on whether the picture accompanied with it is appealing to the eye. So with Facebook and Twitter, you don't necessarily have to have an image to post certain things. With Instagram, all posts essentially are accommodated with or accompanied with an image or a video of some sort. That's why it's such a heavy like photo-based messaging system. Instagram also sort of has direct messages, but it's one of the trade-offs that you get in terms of Facebook to Instagram. Facebook, you can also instant message, but you don't need to post. Instagram, you could also instant message, but usually posts need to be with a photo. And so you could sort of keep up with friends and family still by using Instagram, but note that you'll just get a lot of images on your feed, and that's sort of what is heavy on that. Copying and pasting and saving a photo on Instagram is possible. You could do it on your phone by using taking a screenshot on your phone. So for Apple devices, that could be whatever version you have. It may differ. Sometimes it's like the power button plus the home button, or the power button plus the volume button. If you do it on an internet browser, you could sort of right click and then do save image, or you could just take a screenshot on your computer as well. But that's also sort of the beauty of Instagram and all of these platforms, really, is that you could sort of save anything if you just want to screenshot it or things like that onto your personal computer, obviously. Instagram also has the story function, which a lot of other social media platforms have sort of started using as well, originating from Snapchat, but then transferring over to different groups. Stories are essentially like smaller tidbits of information, usually for like 15 to 30 seconds, a short video or a short photo that may disappear after 24 hours or maybe archived after 24 hours. So it's not like a permanent image that you could post on your account. This is more of like a temporary thing that just disappears right afterwards. Regarding Twitter, again, it's a much more faster application. A lot of news organizations and media outlets use Twitter just because of ease of access, where you just type whatever's happening and then you tweet it and then it goes out. Personally, we use the Daily Trojan uses Twitter. to report any news or any breaking news that's going on, just because we try to keep on par with other news outlets as well. And you could also use Twitter just for personal things that are going on. Anything, that rambles off the top of your head, you just ramble it on the Twitter and then you post it. A lot of researchers as well use Twitter to sort of vocalize any issues that they have or to publish any scientific findings that they may have. But this is not to be confused with LinkedIn, which we'll sort of go over later. Like Facebook and Instagram, you can interact with other things. The beauty of Twitter is that you can retweet things. So the retweeting is basically just reposting the message again. So Dr. Benton retweeted Wendell Porter. And she also gave a message sort of responding to that tweet specifically. So there's sort of, in terms of like the user experience, you can like read the initial post and then read their response and see how those two relate to one another. Similar to Facebook, you could save these things, and Instagram too, you could save these things either by taking a screenshot or even responding to that person via direct message or saving the tweet itself. And again, most of these applications have a sort of explore function. Instagrams is obviously very photo heavy, but for Twitter, when you explore things on Twitter, they have different categories at the top. And then you could just sort of click based on what category and you'll get a handful of different pieces of information. So obviously COVID-19 was really big on Twitter. And so, institutions like the CDC, the LA Department of Public Health would fall under the COVID-19, sort of category, and you would see all of those things related to COVID-19. You could do it based on news, based on sports. You could also do it based on like very niche topics, USC, you could do it on F1, you could do it on different fashion groups, things like that. And it will also give you suggestions on who to follow based on sort of your interests or what you're looking at for the most part. So between the three that I previously mentioned, there are obviously some differences in terms of like, the general visuals and the interface. Facebook, most people are on Facebook. So you can find friends that you haven't been in touch with, organize large groups, and then Facebook Messenger is sort of the instant messaging function that's paired with the Facebook app. And so those three are sort of to the realm of Facebook. Instagram, mainly photos, videos, anything like that. And you can view posts from your various celebrities or sports teams rather than just reading a message. Twitter, real time, everything sort of as it happens. And it's popular with celebrities, politicians, and journalists and news outlets just to get information out very quickly rather than posting a news release, trying to get it on the news. If you just put it on Twitter, it's already there. Usually when you refresh on Twitter as well, there's always something new that's going on. And there's always a piece of information that, will pop up as the day goes along. LinkedIn is sort of different from all of these. It's not necessarily like a heavy social media platform, but is considered one regardless, just because it's used more for professional and workspace related things. Again, you can get news and updates from various organizations. You can also get updates from folks who may have gotten a new job or maybe switching to a different career path. And so, when I'm on LinkedIn, I see a lot of my friends or even younger friends who are like, I got into this college, or I will be attending this college, or I will be going to this grad school. So, keeping up with a lot of people's professional lives and what they're doing with their careers. And then again, you can sort of check your newsfeed for updates. So the Leonard Davis School of Gerontology posts a lot of different pieces of media on here. So any podcasts that we have, any new pieces of research that we have, along with organizations or much larger organizations by nature, such as IBM and other groups as well. For Twitter and Instagram, I would say that's more intergenerational than Facebook. I think Facebook, unfortunately, does have a perceived stereotype among my generation and younger generations as well. Personally, I'm on Facebook. I have a lot of friends who are on Facebook, but I do understand the sentiment that there is, again, sort of that age-related perception. But regarding to Instagram and Twitter, I think those are both pretty intergenerational by nature, um, because both of those platforms are fairly new in comparison to Facebook. Albeit Instagram was just purchased by Facebook, but um, still by nature, it's still pretty brand new in comparison to the older giants like Facebook. For LinkedIn, a lot of younger people tend to use LinkedIn just because it is as well sort of a newer um, social media platform. But it's also beneficial for news and updates and then learning more about organizations that you may be interested in. I have a friend who uses LinkedIn in correlation with sort of his stocks, just to see what companies are up to and if they're rolling out new information that may not be caught up as quickly on like a Twitter or something like that. Just because LinkedIn is more seen as this professional outlet, whereas Twitter is sort of a mix of both. You could connect with former or current coworkers, meet individuals who may be in similar fields or certain companies, or even may have attended, same academic institutions. So for USC, obviously, if you look at USC on LinkedIn, you'll get a whole list of alumni and current students, and even prospective students as well. So you could sort of find people using that. Even going all the way back to high school, you may find certain people from your high school using LinkedIn if your high school has that sort of page, just because LinkedIn encourages users to upload a lot of their professional and educational experiences. Um, LinkedIn also has a messaging feature, albeit not as rigorous or as intense as a Facebook, or I'm sorry, not intense, but not as rigorous or as detailed as like a Facebook or Instagram. These messages on LinkedIn are mainly for, are you interested in an interview, or tell me more about what you do kind of things, more like coffee shop topics rather than, getting to know someone's life story. YouTube is one that we covered very recently, about 2 presentations ago. YouTube is a pretty interesting social media platform in that, like Instagram, it does rely heavily on videos to be its source of content. So this is sort of the main YouTube page as well. As you could see, music videos, content, and then also documentaries or different platforms as well are presented via YouTube. So like Twitter, there are certain categories that you can look into. So bossa nova, instrumentals, Maroon 5, basketball, USC, all those things could sort of be a category under YouTube, and you would find videos relating to those topics as well. With regards to the types of videos, there are different types of videos on YouTube, sort of like how there are different types of tweets or different things different interactions that you could have on different platforms. So YouTube has live videos, it also has standard videos and then curated playlists. So live videos are happening as you're watching them. So like live TV, if you're watching like a football game or something like that, or any sports event, and you're watching it live, you can sort of do the same thing on YouTube, where a lot of people will host certain events live as it's going. Standard videos, these videos are sort of like when you pre-record something on your TV, and you can rewatch it as many times as you'd like. So obviously the video of What is Fire was made 6 years ago, and then over that time it's accumulated over 7 million likes. So those sort of things just happen over time. And then curated playlists are sort of based on videos that you may have already watched or certain categories that you may already watch, and YouTube sort of compiles them together and creates this sort of playlist where you could just watch videos consistently, or a multitude of videos that would all pertain ideally to your interests. And so the search function on YouTube, like search function for many other groups, sort of saves your search history. So anything that you've looked up in the past, you can look it up again. And it will also recommend certain categories depending on what you used in the past. There are also voice commands on YouTube, and then YouTube also has certain quote unquote apps curtailed to certain audiences. So YouTube TV is sort of YouTube's way of getting into the streaming service. YouTube Music is strictly for music. YouTube Kids is strictly for kids. And then Creator Academy and the other one are for people who are aspiring to use YouTube more or to create content on YouTube. That's sort of their way of learning more about sort of getting the ropes as to how to curate content, how do I optimize the platform in my favor? How do I make money off the platform? Things like that. And then I will sort of jump into cybersecurity. This one's a bit hefty. And I've sort of made edits on this one as well. This was also a topic that we had covered in the past. But cybersecurity is always such a complex topic to talk about by nature, just because everybody sort of has their own preferences and each platform has its own pros and cons. So obviously between YouTube or Yahoo and Google, to a question that was mentioned earlier, obviously Google is known to be the more secure one, and then Yahoo also has had issues regarding security. I think like very recently they had like a password leak or something like that, or a data leak off of Yahoo. So it really is subjective to what you prefer. So the issue with Yahoo is that, yes, there are data leaks and there are things that are systematically problematic about its security system. Whereas for Google, it's known to be very secure, but it is also known to sort of track and make recommendations based on your clicks. So there's that sort of trade-off of whether you have a reinvested interest and trust in the Yahoo algorithm and in the Yahoo security system, or if you want to stick with Google and sort of use that at your will, but also under the circumstances that most of your accounts are connected to Google and that you may already be signed into different accounts. But if there are any other questions about that, like specifically, I'm happy to talk about that at the very end as I sort of go along. Regarding cybersecurity and why it's important. So cybersecurity essentially is the protection of personal information from digital threats. That's sort of like the very baseline definition, but it could get a lot more complex if you look into like the very niche areas, basically the very niche areas regarding cybersecurity. So I'll give a very over the top sort of understanding because I'm not really a cybersecurity person myself. But I try my best to understand what security things each of my accounts is trying to do. Essentially, the benefits of cybersecurity is that you keep your information safe, bottom line. How much protection you put in your account could depend on what each platform offers you as well. And so there are some additional resources at the bottom from the CSIA, and then also any safety things, the Ultimate Internet Safety Guide as well. Passwords. So this is sort of the big thing in terms of making sure your information is safe. Most accounts by nature have a password accompanying it. So being able to protect your information using this password is incredibly important. Bitwarden and then other applications are sort of like these databases that you can use to keep all your passwords in one place. Just because a recommendation is that you don't use the same password for multiple accounts, right? Because if somebody gets a hold of your password, then in theory they could log into all of your accounts. So either changing it up or using different ones entirely is recommended. But at the same time, you may just forget what password goes with what. And then if you log in enough times and you accidentally put in the wrong password, then they log you out of your account. And then it's like, why did I even put a password in there in the first place if I was going to be the one who was locked out of my own account? So these password managers are usually very secure by nature, and they keep all of your passwords in one place, depending on what account you're trying to sign into. You could also use like a notepad or anything that you will personally hold on to. In the past, I've sometimes kept on like a post-it note that I keep in my wallet, just to make sure that I always know that I have it on me. But technology has progressed to where we have password managers now, things like that. Some don'ts, obviously, don't include your date of birth in your password. Don't include your name in your password. Those are usually some of the more easier targets or easier guesses. Try to make it complex by nature. So a capital letter, a number, a special symbol. If you make like your password like the name of your pet or like the name of a friend, it's very easy for certain algorithms to just put in letters and then automatically get it. By putting in those special symbols and different capitalizations, different numbers, it makes it harder for thieves or anyone who's trying to get that information off of you to sort of guess that password. As I mentioned before, a lot of browsers also sort of save information. So if you log into a certain account, some browsers like Google Chrome and Safari will give you the option to save it. So that way you don't have to log in again. Usually we don't recommend that just because if somebody gets a hold of your computer, then they just have access to everything by default and by just automatically logging into those things. And then by nature, don't save your credit card information onto your computer. Yeah, that's just financial security and then just being wise financially. There's a thing called multi-factor identification. So multi-factor is you take multiple steps or different layers of security in order to identify yourself and get access into a certain platform. So for your email, for instance, usually you'll have your email and your password, and that would be one-step identification. Multi-factor may be you get your email, your password, and then they text the code to your phone, and you would have to provide the code, and then that provides another layer of security. If in the event, you know, that email password gets out to somebody else, and then there's another step that they have to get through, but they don't have that information, it protects your account. And it just allows you to sort of authenticate that you're the person who is logging in. These can happen in various fashions. So obviously the text message form, which I talked about, they could also verify via a different app. So for USC's Workday, they use, which is sort of the way that employees or even student workers can log in certain hours. The Duo mobile app sort of is a second step identification where you have to authorize a certain login to your account. And so that could be verifying it via an external third-party app. Again, text message or phone message, they may also call you a certain code and then you just type it in, things like that. These are present on a lot of platforms. So obviously on all of the social media platforms I talked about before, there are options for two-factor authentication, but also more important ones like banking accounts, and then also your Apple ID. Those things also have the option for two-step identification. So for Google Mail, that's present on there. For Twitter, it's also present where you could choose text messages, authentication, or security keys. And then Apple, Facebook also provide similar outputs. So on your phone, obviously, you could also do two-factor identification. So you would put in your password, and then maybe you would do like a Face ID, or just another layer of security to protect everything that's on your phone. Or you could do it for specific apps. So for instance, like your banking account, they sort of have where you have to put in your card information, or you have to do a secure device like your phone or another computer where you have to log in twice, essentially, to get access to that information. So all in all, multi-factor identification just provides the extra layer of security and also sort of the knowledge that your information is safe behind two layers of security, rather than if somebody were to steal your password, they don't automatically have access to your accounts because they can't authenticate themselves. This may also come in the form of like security questions as well, as one that I forgot. So sometimes if you create a new account, they'll give you like 3 security questions, like what's your first dog's name? What street did you live on? What high school did you go to? Things like that. And those also serve as different forms of identification to sort of protect everything that's in your account. And also to help recover any information. So say you forget the first password, all in all, if they bring you to the second step of multi-factor identification, it could help you recover the first password without causing too much trouble or locking you out permanently from that account. So updating your software as well can be a bit of a pain in the butt, just because there may be some time where you don't have access to your device just because it's updating over time. Even certain apps, on your phone may require updates. So those could take maybe 5-10 minutes, but for larger devices, especially for Apple products, I'm an Apple guy. So whenever I have to update an iOS, I know that I won't have my phone for like 2-3 hours just because it needs to be plugged into a power source and it will take some time to sort of load everything. But it's usually for good reason. Obviously, a lot of providers are making updates to these platforms, to these apps, to these devices that allow them to be more secure. And by nature, it helps them repair any security bugs that may exist on the device or platform already, and sort of, straightens out any kinks that may, be a vulnerability to you or to your information as a whole. So some of the more common scams, these are ways for people to sort of get hold of your information without directly, sort of like hacking you or getting your information through some technological means. So obviously threatening calls from the IRS, fake charity appeals, bank fraud, insurance scams, website password requests, any urgent requests, and more recently, COVID-19 related calls were all very big in the past year or so with regards to getting information from people, especially if it sounds like if it's a relative who's asking for that sort of information. There is a higher susceptibility that you will give up that information, out of concern for somebody else or for yourself. But always be wary and don't use sort of head over heart is what I like to say. Think logically as you're sort of going through these sort of things, and make sure that you're doing everything in your power to verify that something is actually happening versus just immediately giving up your information out of fear or out of fright that something may happen. It's better to sort of protect everything that you have and think logically than to sort of give it all up off of a whim or off of a gut reaction. Telephone scams as well. So real people, robocalls, text messages, all sort of examples are pictured here. If you're set to get a delivery, but you don't even remember ordering anything, probably a scam. If your account is locked for security reasons and they text you about it, probably a scam. For the most part, a lot of companies may email you regarding these sort of things, or may send you mail regarding these things nowadays rather than text. So again, head over heart, just sort of be logical about, knowing what's going on, like what things are actually happening, and protecting your personal information and your financial information as well. So don't answer calls from unknown numbers. Usually my rule of thumb is to leave a voicemail if it's like an important call or if you need to get a hold of me, because in that case, I can listen to the voicemail and sort of listen to who's calling. Don't return one-ring calls. So sometimes people will quickly dial and then hang up and it will register on your phone. Usually don't, call those numbers back unless you know for certain that it's somebody that you know. Don't follow instructions from pre-recorded messages. Don't give out personal financial data, obviously. Don't pay for registration or shipping fees for free products or prizes. Usually I don't even try to go for free products or prizes unless it's like directly in my face and I'm face to face with the person and I win a prize. I usually try not to do those things over the internet or over the phone, just because a lot of the times they will ask for your payment information, and that's an easy way for them to get a hold of all of your financials. Don't make payments by gift card, prepaid debit card, or wire transfer. For Amazon in particular, Amazon has like its own gift card So that may obviously be an exception just because they do have a code that allows you to verify it. But if there are any external parties that are asking you to pay by any of these means, usually we try to stay away from it. Usually pay by check, pay by credit card. If you pay by credit card, you could easily just freeze your card or freeze your account, or even, cut off your credit card just to avoid those sort of payments from going through. With debit cards, it's another case where once that money is gone, it's gone. Just because there's no protective barrier with debit cards in comparison to credit cards. I'll talk about the National Do Not Call Registry on the next slide. But there are things like call blocking apps, hanging up on illegal robocalls. If there are telemarketers and you pick up, asking them to slow down. Sometimes there are pre-recorded messages that sound like it's a telemarketer, but when you ask them or talk to them, they don't slow down or they just keep talking. Then it's sort of like a robocall. Most telemarketers will, in theory, should be respectful and will slow down and sort of adhere to your concerns or any of your questions. So just be aware of that, and then don't commit right away to certain deals or any sort of plans that they may offer to you. And then finally, just independently research those sort of things. So if a charity calls you, do research on the charity. It's not a bad thing to say up front that you don't want to donate to a charity if you do the research and you find out it's not a real charity in the first place and everybody's losing money except for the scammers. But if you do independently do your research, find that it's a valid charity and then call them again or donate on their website, you're still contributing to that charity regardless if maybe you didn't agree to donate on the first call or on the first go. The National Do Not Call Registry, I'm registered on this. I will say though, it does not stop every call, but for the most part, it does stop a lot of robocalls, or I've gotten less robocalls than I have in the past from various states or various parts of the world. Essentially, you just go to the website, you verify your phone number, and then you just put your phone number in, and then the Do Not Call Registry basically sort of blocks a good amount of robocalls from picking up on your number or picking up your number on a list that they sort of go through in calling or offering certain things as well. Avoiding online scams. So with regards to emails, usually for the most part, their emails may look absolutely ridiculous. So as you could see sort of here on the picture on the right, the email is just a random series of letters followed by .us. And so when you're looking for online scams, look for any pieces of incorrect spelling or grammar, look for the name that they put under there, look for any confidential information, or if they're asking for confidential information. If it automatically falls into your spam folder, usually for Google Drive or even for any email browser, that may be an indication that it's a scam. And at the end of the day, don't click on anything on the website or on the email. I usually just say, just click the trash to get rid of it. So that way it's not sitting on your email and it may be something that you may accidentally open again by chance. Yeah, so just make sure that you're sort of aware. On Google Drive specifically, it will say, why is this message in spam? Google Drive sort of sifts through a lot of these things and then automatically puts them into spam if they think it's a sort of scam. With regards to certain websites, so making sure that the website is safe. So there's usually an encryption symbol on a lot of web browsers to show that the website is secure and it's not being shared with any other parties. On the image below, it says amazonx.com. Obviously, you want to go on only amazon.com, and there's also no lock or encryption symbol, so we can identify this one as sort of a scam website, just because it's using fake imagery and then it has like a grammar mistake at the top. So looking at the whole website holistically, excuse me, and also looking for the information that it's asking from you and verifying that it's the right website. Ad blockers, these are sort of optional. I will say that I personally have an ad blocker just to help me sort of navigate without being distracted by certain ads. But another one, maybe just don't click on ads at all. Um, if you're interested in something, just directly look it up. If you see it as an ad on a website or something like that, usually we tell people don't click on it just because it may lead to another website or maybe a phishing scam, which some of you may be familiar with, where you click on a certain website and then it automatically gives up your information to um, thieves or hackers by nature. These are some examples of ad blockers, though, if you're interested. I will say that for a lot of ad blockers, you may run into issues with certain news or media outlets just because those organizations thrive off of advertisements as their main source of revenue. And then if you put an ad blocker in, it basically blocks them from making any revenue off of that website. So they may ask you to turn off the ad blocker for that certain site. So like LA Times, New York Times, Washington Post. I know all three of those when I try to look up articles, they will tell me to, or they'll ask me to turn off my ad blocker just because, again, their revenue is based on classifieds and advertisements on the website. This is just sort of how to get to the Chrome store and then finding various ad blockers. So that concludes me talking for 50 minutes. I appreciate your guys' patience. I know that I have a tendency to have a very monotone voice, but I appreciate everybody sticking in there. I put a link in the chat earlier. I'll put it in again. This is sort of to help us figure out topics for next semester as Bob, myself, and then the rest of the GeroTech team sort of talk about prepping for the spring. We have some potential topics that Bob has recommended, so shout out to him. I sort of read through all of them and I thought that they were fantastic, but if there are any specific ones that you guys want to see, so we've talked about Microsoft Office, Slack, those are some that we've talked about as an e-board, just because I know the university has also started pushing Slack a lot for certain schools, but also talking about the cloud and the idea of storing information, and then also smart home functionality. So a few semesters ago, we had a discussion about Alexa and sort of how that connects with everything. So maybe going more in depth about it. I know WordPress has also been something that people have been interested in. So feel free to fill out that survey. Slack is sort of like a messaging function, or it's like a messaging app that a lot of like professional teams use to communicate with one another. So some of my classes use Slack, where our teachers will sort of make announcements through there instead of through our class site on Blackboard. And you can also private message people and talk about certain things depending on what you need. But Slack, imagine it to be like a more professional Facebook, like a very, very professional Facebook, but not LinkedIn, where you could see everybody's updates, but just your team's updates and people that you personally know. But yeah, thank you guys.